With the Edmonton Oilers stars frustrated, could we see a big blockbuster trade incoming? Could Leon Draisaitl be headed to Boston? And could Connor McDavid be coming home to the Leafs? We'll discuss this coming up on this episode of Hattrick HQ. But before we get into that, just want to say that 82.6% of you guys aren't subscribed. So if you're looking for a home to daily NHL content, look no further. Go down below, hit that subscribe button, become a part of the community here because we'll be here all season long, keeping you up to date on what's happening around the league. But with that said, let's get right into our first topic of the video today, and that is Bruins are seriously interested in Leon Draisaitl. And as we see this article from a reputable source with Hockey Buzz, he says, my sources tell me the Boston Bruins have made several calls regarding Leon Draisaitl and see him as the main target should Edmonton decide, or should Leon Draisaitl decide the road is coming to an end in Edmonton. And obviously Leon Draisaitl is one of the biggest stars in the NHL. As we take a look at his stats here, obviously the last two seasons he has put up 110 plus points and has put up over 100 points in 4 seasons in his career. And so far this season, he's at 26 points in 19 games. And Mark, this is some crazy news coming out of Hockey Buzz here today. Obviously Leon Draisaitl, one of the top stars in the NHL, he may be potentially going to the Boston Bruins.
This would be a massive ad for the Bruins. The big thing here is you kind of need to look at what would it take to acquire a guy like this. Obviously, we've seen Bergeron and Krejci recently retired, so they're kind of in the midst of trying to find this new franchise center. I think Draisaitl would come in and obviously be that number one immediately. But the Bruins are such a strong team. They're top in the East right now. They're continuing on rolling from last season. So the big thing is you don't want to move out maybe too much of your current core to bring in a guy. But getting Draisaitl would be the number one guy, like I said, that they would need. They still have so many pieces around him, like Pasta. I mean, you can just kind of go on with this entire list. So maybe moving out a guy like Charlie Coyle, a bunch of picks, prospects, whatever it takes. I think the Bruins should look into this, and I think it would just extend their window of competing and trying to win the Stanley Cup again.
Yeah, and Bruins have been a great organization in recent years, have always been contending for the playoffs, and but it just seems like in recent events they just can't get over that hump once they make the playoffs. They have a great regular season, but they never really have anybody that can push them through a series and carry a series. And I really do think adding a guy like Leon Draisaitl and having him with a guy like Pasternak would really propel this team, and they'd be an even more dominant force than they already are. And I definitely have to agree with you there. Moving out a guy like Coyle and a bunch of picks to get a guy like Leon Draisaitl. Sure, you're giving up your future, but you're giving it up to try to get a Stanley Cup. And if you add a guy like this to your roster, there's definitely no doubt in my mind that they'd be the favorite for the Stanley Cup.
And the big thing is, too, you kind of need to look at this as well. If the Oilers look at this and say, we're just going to move Draisaitl, we're going to continue to try to keep McDavid happy and not move him out. You have a guy like Ullmark or Swayman that you can put in as a sweetener. This would fix the problems in net for the Oilers immediately. You get a guy back like maybe Charlie Coyle, maybe a higher level player. You could get Jake DeBrusk, a couple other pieces as well. And like I said, this would try to make McDavid stay. You kind of use this leverage to be like, hey, we're going to get these other players to help still compete. I know we're moving your best friend in Draisaitl, but I think this is a situation where it benefits both teams in the sense if the Oilers do need to move them, they can get a lot back and still open up this window a bit. And then the Bruins just get so much better with adding a top player like Draisaitl.
Yeah, definitely. I have to agree with you there. Obviously, Boston knows what they got in their goaltending right now, and they see that Edmonton is looking for a goaltender. So I guess they're just trying their best to maybe throw everything out there and try to get a guy like Leon Draisaitl back that could really help them push towards a Stanley Cup. But there is another team that is interested in Leon Draisaitl, and that is the Buffalo Sabres. They say there's also a strong interest in Leon Draisaitl from the Buffalo Sabres. Would the Sabres be willing to give up one of their first overall defensemen plus a pick? I mean, to get Leon to Buffalo, I really do think that you'd have to give up a guy like Rasmus Dahlin.
I think the first thing the Bruins would, sorry, not the Bruins, the Sabres would say is no for Dahlin. I think the two real untouchable guys, in my eyes, for the Sabres at least, would be Tage and Dahlin. Obviously, you want to continue building around these guys. I know the Oilers would 100% want Dahlin, Tage, one of these guys. But with the Sabres being such an up and coming team, they've built this team from the bottom basically. Tage Thompson was the player that they acquired. Dahlin was a guy they drafted. So I think they try to keep both these guys. I think the Bruins are more likely to give up on a couple of younger guys to make the big push, but I could see the Sabres kind of getting into the mix, and obviously almost every team in the league will put in an offer or try to entice the Oilers with something.
Yeah, definitely. He's definitely one of the biggest names in the NHL, and you're going to try to your best to get him in your organization. Another guy that I could potentially see them, given the Edmonton would be Zach Benson. He's 18 years old and he's playing phenomenal right now. I think, if they're more leaning towards, retooling or rebuilding in Edmonton, trying to move both McDavid and Draisaitl, this could be a guy that we see them, get for a guy like Leon Draisaitl.
That's the big thing too. And you also have a couple contracts. I mean, Skinner doesn't hold too much value, but this is a contract that could help match. You have a guy like Tuck, which does hold a lot of value. Maybe the Oilers look at this and he could be the immediate replacement for Draisaitl going into the lineup. So it's interesting to see if the disgruntled guys in Draisaitl and so on start to not want to be with his team. Draisaitl only has 2 years, including this year, left on his deal. So if he continues to be disgruntled, it goes into next year towards deadline. He's not signed. He makes it public he doesn't want to be there. I think this is when the Oilers really need to start shopping him, and you can't take the chance of losing for nothing.
Yeah, definitely. They want to try to get the most value they can. They don't want to lose a guy for nothing. So, I mean, if he really wants to leave or whatever happens at Edmonton, I mean, the best bet is to try to ship him out for as much as you can. But there is another guy in Edmonton who we're going to talk about now, and that is McDavid, a future Leaf. And in this same article, they say here that there's also no secret about the Toronto Maple Leafs' desire to bring home Connor McDavid. A source told me this morning that part of the problem signing William Nylander long term is the possibility that McDavid becomes available. Everyone would be in play, the source continued, but adding McDavid would be impossible if William Nylander were to exceed $10 million a year. And we're just going to take a look at Connor McDavid's stats. Obviously, the best player in the NHL last year, put up a career high 153 points, and in almost every single year in his career, he's put up 100 plus points. And so far this season, he's put up 20 points in 17 games. And Mark, obviously, this would be a insane trade for the Toronto Maple Leafs, bring Connor McDavid to Toronto. But would you be willing to give up a guy like William Nylander to bring in Connor McDavid?
A one-for-one swap. I know Nylander's super hot right now, but this is the best player in the league. I mean, if you somehow figured out a way to go McDavid, Matthews, Tavares as your 1, 2, and 3 down the middle, the wings might be a little weak, but that's probably the best of all time, honestly, if you go down. But I think this might be more of a situation of they monitor Connor until he gets to free agency, and I think that's when they make their big offer. I mean, if you go back and you kind of look at Lindros, he was just this kind of guy they traded at draft. I know this was a bit of a situation where he didn't want to play for a certain team and so on, but this took Forsberg, Ron Hextall. There's so many guys. I think there's 5 or 6 notable pieces in this trade that took to get a guy like Lindros. So I think if McDavid was moved in a trade, I personally think it would be the biggest trade of all time. I think there'd be so many assets of that's players that are ready to play now, prospects, mortgage all your picks. It's pretty much everything you can offer without breaking up your current team. So I could see being maybe Nylander, Marner, bunch of prospects, Nick Robertson, Liljegren, as much as they could offer to bring in a guy. So I think this is where they'll kind of look at this as a free agency ad. I know if everyone watched the draft, when the balls were falling for the McDavid draft, Toronto almost fell in and the Oilers came up. There's a picture of McDavid looking sad. Obviously, he wants to be in Toronto. Every Ontario boy wants to. So I think there's a high chance that we genuinely might see him entice this maybe in free agency. He does come to Toronto. Call me the delusional Leafs fan, but everyone knows around the league, Ontario boys want to be in Ontario. And I think Connor McDavid may actually become a Toronto Maple Leafs within the next 3 to 4 years.
I really do think that there is a chance that he comes to Toronto. Like you said, every Ontario player wants to play in Toronto, and I really do think we will see him in Toronto before his career is over. And if you got to wait 3 years to make this happen, you got to wait 3 years because obviously this guy is the best player in the NHL. And like you said, if you're going to trade for him, you kind of got to throw the house at him. You got to give up a guy like Marner, a guy like Nylander, a bunch of future picks. But I mean, it is worth it in that sense to bring in the best player in the NHL, the best player in a long time in the league, to potentially, get Toronto over that hump and get a Stanley Cup. Because I really do think if you have Matthews and McDavid on your team, there's no shot in my mind that you're not winning the Stanley Cup.
And that's the big thing too. You look at the Leafs team, Tavares' contract's up next year. Same with Nylander's. Marner's up the year after. So you're going to have to give money to Nylander and Marner, sorry. But then when you look at Tavares, this is a guy that's going to probably take a little less. The cap's going up. There's going to be so many factors coming in that I think if Connor McDavid becomes available, I think the Leafs can figure this out. We've seen them work the cap before. Everyone's going to joke about the Robert Ellis Island, Klingberg, Muzzin, all these guys being on LTIR. But I think personally, you can make this work, and I think you make the sacrifices to try to keep this team together. Like I said, just picture Marner, Matthews, Nylander, Tavares, Connor McDavid, and whoever else you want to put on his line. I think this would be, without a doubt, the best top six, best top nine the league has ever really seen.
Yeah, I definitely had to agree with you there. And like I said previously, like if you gotta wait 3 years to potentially get a guy like this, I really do think you hold out and try to keep as many pieces around it as you can, because you don't really want to trade guys like Nylander and Marner, two great players in the NHL, just to get a guy like Connor McDavid. I know obviously that it would be worth it, but I mean if you can try to keep this team around and come back with one of the biggest free agency signings of all time in Connor McDavid, I really do think you try to hold out for that. But it will be really interesting to see what happens coming up here over the next couple of years. Maybe we will see Draisaitl traded and maybe McDavid will want out. We'll have to see what happens, but it's really going to be interesting to see what happens here. But we're going to get into everybody's favorite topic here, and that is comment of the day. And the comment of the day today goes to Kevin. He says, good video. Click like. Shout out to you, Kevin. Thanks for commenting on the video. We really appreciate seeing all your guys' comments down in the comment section below. So make sure to go down below on this video. Comment down below, what do you think about McDavid potentially coming home to Ontario to play with the Leafs? And what do you think about Draisaitl potentially going to Boston or Buffalo? Let us know down below. But if you enjoyed this video, make sure to go down below, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. We'd really appreciate it. But I've been KC alongside my co-host Mark Pye. Keep your stick on the ice.